Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great! Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
Have you ever looked up at the stars and thought how it all works? Well, one man changed the way we see the universe. His name is Albert Einstein. You probably know his name and maybe even his famous equation E=mc². But do you know his story? From a curious boy who didn't always like school to the genius who worked out some of the biggest secrets of space and time, Einstein's life was full of surprises. In this video, we'll travel from his early life in Germany, through his amazing discoveries to his later life in America. Get ready to learn about the incredible life of Albert Einstein, the man who made us see the world in a whole new way. Chapter 1. A Young Boy. Albert Einstein was born in Germany, in a city called Ulm, on the 14th of March, 1879. His family was Jewish. His father, Hermann Einstein, had a small business. His mother, Pauline Koch, took care of the home. Albert had one younger sister, Maja. When Albert was a child, he was a quiet boy. He was not very good at talking at first. He started to speak later than most children. Some people worried about him, but he was very curious. He liked to ask questions about everything. He wanted to know how things worked. One story says that when Albert was about 5 years old, his father gave him a compass. Albert was very interested in it. He wondered why the needle always pointed in the same direction. He couldn't see anything pushing or pulling it. This made him think a lot about the world around him. Albert went to school in Munich. He was a good student in math and science. But he didn't like the way they taught in school. He didn't like to just remember things. He wanted to understand them. He often thought about problems in his own way. He did not always follow the rules. This made his teachers think he was not a good student. He liked to learn by himself. He enjoyed reading books about science and math. He often spent time thinking about difficult problems. He was independent and liked to do things his way. He was very interested in how things worked and why they were the way they were. When Albert was about 15, his family moved to Italy. Later, he moved to Switzerland to go to a better school. This was a big change for him, but he was excited to start a new life in a new place. He was ready to learn more about the world. This move to Switzerland was a very important step in his life. Chapter 2. School Days. Albert Einstein did not always like school. He was a very smart boy, but he had problems in traditional schools. He didn't like learning by heart and following rules all the time. He liked to think for himself. One of the schools he went to was the Luitpold Gymnasium in Munich, Germany. He was not happy there. The teachers were very strict. Albert did not do well because he did not want to learn in the way they taught. He often felt bored, and that the things he learned were not interesting. Later, his family moved to Switzerland. This was a change for him. He went to a new school called the Aargau Cantonal School. This school was different. The teachers were more kind, and they encouraged students to think for themselves. Here, Albert enjoyed his classes more and started to do much better. He liked math and science very much. He studied hard and got good grades. After finishing this school, Albert wanted to go to a very good university called the ETH Zurich. It was famous for science and engineering. To get into the ETH, he had to pass an entrance examination. He studied a lot for the exam. However, he wasn't perfect, especially in languages. He even failed part of the exam the first time. So he went back to school for a year and tried again. In the end, he did well enough and was allowed to study at the ETH. This was a very important step for him. It was where he could really learn about the things he was interested in, and it was the beginning of his life as a scientist. Even though school was hard sometimes, it helped him to learn and get ready for his future. Chapter 3. Big Ideas. After finishing school, Albert went to a special university in Zurich called the ETH. This was a big step for him. It was a place where he could really study what he loved, physics and maths. The classes were difficult, but Albert was very interested in the topics. He often spent hours thinking about how the world worked. At the ETH, Albert met other students who also liked science. He made friends and they talked a lot about their ideas. Some of his teachers were very good, and Albert learned a lot from them. He started to write his own scientific papers. These papers were about some of his early ideas on light and energy. He wanted to understand how they behaved. He was curious about everything. One of the things Albert thought about a lot was light. How fast does it move? What is it made of? These questions were very exciting for him. He also started to think about the relationship between energy and how things move. These were big, important ideas that would later change the way people saw the world. While he was studying, Albert also met a woman called Mileva Maric. She was a student too, and she also loved physics. They became good friends, and soon their friendship became something more. They spent a lot of time together talking about science and life. They eventually got married. After some years, Albert finished his studies at the ETH. He had a degree now, which meant he could start working. However, finding a good job wasn't easy. But he kept studying and thinking about science. He was ready to explore his big ideas even more. The time at the ETH had given him a strong foundation for his future discoveries. He was ready to try to answer some of the most difficult questions about the universe. Chapter 4. A Great Year. The year 1905 was a very important year for Albert Einstein. It was like a magic year for him. People even call it his miracle year. In this one year, Albert wrote 4 very important papers. These papers changed how we understand the world. At this time, Albert was not working at a university. He had finished his studies, but he couldn't find a teaching job. So, he worked at a patent office in Switzerland. A patent office is where people get permission for new inventions. It was a job that helped him live. But Albert's real passion was still science. He thought about science a lot, even when he was at work. One of his famous papers was about something called the photoelectric effect. This is about how light can make electricity. Albert explained it in a new way. His ideas showed that light sometimes acts like waves and sometimes like tiny particles. This was a big step in science. Another paper was about Brownian motion. This is about how very small things, like dust particles, move in water. Albert explained that these small things move because the water is made of even smaller moving particles that we can't see. This helps scientists understand more about how the world is made. His third paper was about special relativity. This is a big idea about how time and space are connected. Albert showed that time and space are not the same for everyone. It depends on how fast you are moving. This paper changed how scientists thought about these things forever. The most famous idea from that year was about the connection between mass and energy. This is the idea behind the famous equation, EmC squared. This means that a small amount of mass can make a lot of energy. This idea is very important for understanding things like the sun and also the atomic bomb. Even though Albert was working at the patent office, he kept working on his science. His amazing papers from 1905 showed how clever he was. He changed the world of science in this one amazing year. This miracle year made him famous and started him on the path to becoming one of the most famous scientists in the world. Chapter 5. A New Look at the World. After the amazing discoveries of 1905, Albert Einstein continued to think deeply about the universe. He wanted to understand gravity better. He knew that Isaac Newton's ideas about gravity were very useful, but they didn't explain everything. So, Einstein started to work on a new theory. This new theory was called general relativity. It was very different from Newton's ideas. Einstein said that gravity isn't a force that pulls things together. Instead, he said that gravity is a result of how big things, like planets and stars, bend space and time. Imagine a bowling ball placed trampoline. The ball makes the trampoline dip down. Einstein's theory is like that. Big objects make space and time curve, and this curving is what we feel as gravity. One interesting thing that came from this theory was that light can also be bent by gravity. This might sound strange, but Einstein's calculations showed that light from a distant star would bend a little bit when it passed close to the sun. Scientists later saw this bending during an eclipse of the sun, which proved that Einstein was right. Another idea from general relativity was gravitational time dilation. This means that time moves differently depending on how strong gravity is. Time moves a little slower where gravity is stronger. This is not something we notice in everyday life, but it's important for scientists who use very accurate clocks. People started to pay attention to Einstein's work. He received recognition and awards for his discoveries. His ideas were hard to understand, but they were also very important. More and more people began to see him as a great thinker, a famous scientist. Einstein went from a simple worker at the patent office to a well-known person. He was often in the newspapers. People all over the world were talking about his ideas. He was famous not just among scientists, but also with ordinary people. This fame would change his life and how the world saw science. Chapter 6: War and Peace. The world was changing very quickly. The early 1900s were a time of big discoveries in science, but also a time of growing problems in Europe. Nations were becoming more powerful and competitive. This led to the First World War, a terrible conflict that changed everything. Albert Einstein was a scientist, not a soldier. He believed in peace. When the war started, many scientists in Germany supported their country. But Einstein did not. He thought war was wrong and that people from different countries should work together, not fight. He became known for his pacifism. He was against all wars. This was not a popular opinion at the time. He saw how the war made people hate others just because they were from a different country. He felt sad and worried about this rise of nationalism. Nationalism is when people think their country is the best and they don't care about other countries. Einstein believed that science should be for everyone, not just for one nation. During this time, even though the world was in conflict, Einstein continued his work in physics. He started to think about how to combine gravity with electromagnetism. He was looking for a unified field theory, one big idea that could explain all forces in the universe. This was a very difficult problem, and he spent many years working on it. He also tried to work with scientists from other countries, even during the war. He believed that science should bring people together. After the war, he became more involved in international scientific collaborations. He wanted scientists from all over the world to share ideas and discoveries. In 1921, Albert Einstein received the Nobel Prize in Physics. This was a great honor, and it showed the world how important his work was. He got the prize for his explanation of the photoelectric effect, the idea about how light can push electrons. This prize made him even more famous. Even with his growing fame, Einstein never forgot his belief in peace. He always spoke out against war and worked for a better world. He showed the world that it is possible to be a brilliant scientist and also a person who cares deeply about humanity. The years of war and conflict made Einstein think even more deeply about the world and the importance of peace. Chapter 7: Leaving Europe. Life in Germany was changing. The 1930s were a difficult time. A new political group, the Nazis, were becoming more and more powerful. They did not like Jewish people. They said bad things about them and blamed them for many problems. Albert Einstein was Jewish, and these changes made his life very hard. People started to say that his work, his science, was Jewish science, which was not good. They said his ideas were wrong just because he was Jewish. This made Albert feel very sad and angry. He knew that he could not stay in Germany anymore. It was too dangerous for him and his family. He knew he had to make a difficult decision. Leave Europe. It was his home, the place he grew up, and where he had done so much important work. But he could not stay where he was not safe. Many other scientists and artists were also leaving Europe because of the Nazis. They were looking for new places to live and work. Albert decided to go to the United States. He was offered a job at the Institute for Advanced Study in a town called Princeton. This was a very good place for him to continue his research. He knew that, in America, he could work without fear. He traveled across the ocean with his wife, Elsa. It was a big change for them. They had to learn a new language and get used to a new culture. But they were also relieved to be safe. Albert was happy that he could keep working on his science and share his ideas with the world. Princeton became his new home. He was very grateful to start a new life where he could be free. Chapter 8. New Home, New Worries. Life in Princeton was very different for Albert Einstein than in Europe. He now lived in a small, quiet town in America. He worked at the Institute for Advanced Study, a place where smart people could think and research. He had a comfortable house and could walk to work. He liked the peacefulness after the difficult times in Germany. But even in this new place, Einstein had worries. He still loved physics, and he continued to think about the universe. He tried to find one big idea that could explain everything. This was his dream, but it was very hard work. Sometimes he felt frustrated because he couldn't find the answers he was looking for. Besides his science, Einstein also cared about his people. He was a Jew, and he was sad about what was happening in Europe. He wanted to help Jewish people find a safe place. He supported the Zionist movement, which wanted to create a Jewish country. He felt that it was important to give people a place where they could be safe and free. A big problem in the world was also worrying him: nuclear weapons. Scientists had discovered how to make atomic bombs. Einstein was scared because these bombs were very dangerous. He knew that they could kill many people. He thought it was important to warn people about the danger. He wrote a letter to President Roosevelt, the leader of America, about this. He explained the danger and talked about the need for America to have its own atomic bomb before other countries did. It was a very difficult decision for him because he wanted peace. But he felt that he had to act. Einstein did not work on making the atomic bomb himself. He just warned the president about the danger. When he learned about the bombs that were used in Japan, he was very sad. He did not think that these weapons should be used. Life in Princeton was a mix of thinking about physics, helping his people, and worrying about the world. Einstein always did what he thought was right. He wanted to make the world a better place, even when it was difficult. Chapter 9. An Old Man. The years passed quickly for Albert in Princeton. He was now an old man, but his mind was still very active. He lived in a small house with his family and enjoyed simple things like walking and playing the violin. Although he was famous, he liked his life to be quiet. He still spent a lot of his time thinking about the world and how it worked. Even in his older age, Albert never stopped being interested in peace and fairness. He spoke out about things he thought were wrong. He believed that everyone should be treated with respect, no matter their race or religion. He often shared his ideas about peace and how to avoid war. He wanted a better world for everyone. He continued to work on his ideas about physics. He was especially interested in a big idea called the unified field theory. This idea tried to connect all the different forces in nature into one simple idea. He worked very hard on this, but it was difficult. Even though he didn't finish it, he never gave up. Albert also thought a lot about his life. He knew that he had done important things. He was proud of his work, but he was also very humble. He believed that everyone could learn and discover new things. He knew that science was always changing, and that people should keep asking questions. As he grew older, Albert's body got weaker. He had some health problems, but he kept working and thinking. He lived a full life, full of curiosity and passion. He understood that life is a journey, and he lived it with courage and intelligence. Chapter 10. After Einstein. Albert Einstein died in 1955. His health had been bad for some time. Even though he was gone, his ideas did not die with him. His work changed science in many ways. First, his ideas about physics are still very important. Scientists use his theories of relativity to understand the universe. For example, they use them to study black holes and the way gravity works. His work on light and energy also led to many new inventions. Think of things like lasers and solar panels. These all come from Einstein's ideas. But Einstein's impact was not just in science. He became famous all over the world. People knew his name and his face. He was a symbol of intelligence and thinking. He was even seen as a kind of wise old man. His picture is everywhere, on posters, in books, and even on T-shirts. He became a part of popular culture. People still talk and argue about his theories. Some of his ideas are very difficult to understand. Scientists still work to prove or change them. This shows that his work was not just about one moment in time. It's a work in progress, and his ideas are still important. Einstein left behind a big legacy. He showed the world that it is important to ask questions and to think for yourself. He also showed the importance of peace. He was a strong believer in using science to help people, not to hurt them. His impact is still being felt today. One more thing is interesting. After Einstein died, scientists looked at his brain. They wanted to see if there was anything special about it. It became a famous research topic. This shows how people were fascinated by him, even after his death. Albert Einstein was more than just a scientist. He was a person who changed how we see the world. His ideas are still alive, and his legacy continues to inspire people around the globe.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.